Hi, I'm Andrew Shovlin. I'm Trackside Engineering Director with the team, and I'm here to answer your questions from the Chinese Grand Prix. So what happened to Valtteri at the start? Well, he's in pole position, normally the best place to start, but in China there's a painted start-finish line just in front of his grid position, and when he was doing the formation lap start, as he goes over that line, the rear wheels break traction, there's a bit less grip there, and he goes into wheel spin, loses quite a lot of performance. Now he's aware of that when he gets to the race start, and he can try and release the clutch a bit differently, but it's difficult to avoid the fact that there's less grip, and he got a bit of wheel spin again. It wasn't as bad as the formation lap, but it was enough that he lost a few metres to Lewis, and Lewis took the lead into turn one. On the first set of stops, well, we saw Vettel stop on lap 18, and we had a good gap to him. We were thinking about doing a one stop, so we don't want to come in earlier than we have to, because the risk then is your tyres running out at the end of the race. So we were waiting with Valtteri. Now, on this occasion, the gap between Valtteri and Lewis was such that Valtteri would not undercut Lewis on a single stop. If we were determined to do them in the order they were racing, Lewis first, then Valtteri, it would also mean that Lewis would come 2 laps earlier, and he would end up with 2 laps older tyres at the end of the race. So that was the main reason that we decided to do Valtteri first, Lewis second. You may have heard Lewis talking about Valtteri being closer. Well, you do gain a bit of race time, but in a one-stop race, tyre age is more important than that. Lewis would have been on the freshest tyres at the end of the race, and that was really the only risk to his position, was that you run out of tyres in the final few laps. I'm not sure if I can answer this question directly, but I can give you a bit of the background. So lap 35, Vettel comes in. That creates a bit of a dilemma for us, because we have a decent gap to Vettel, but if we stop Lewis first and Valtteri second, there's a risk that Vettel would be able to undercut Valtteri and take position. And if we stop Valtteri first to protect against Vettel and Lewis second, there was a chance that Valtteri would have undercut Lewis. So it put us in a slightly awkward position, and it was actually Toto who suggested we do a stack stop. Now, that then becomes a discussion between James Vowles and Ron Meadows. Ron is the sporting director, and he's just checking that he's comfortable with the gap between the cars, that we can get the pit crew ready to do the stack stop, have both sets of tyres in the pit lane. James is the one who gets the final decision on this, and he decides to go ahead with it. And what it allows us to do is to keep our 2 cars in the same order as they were before the stop, and also protect against losing any positions to Ferrari. So on this occasion it was the perfect solution, and it was actually a really nice, clean, well executed stop by the guys. Now, practicing a double pit stop, well, that's one of the hardest things to practice, because you don't have 2 cars to practice with. We do have a pit stop car here. We can practice getting both sets of tyres out, we can practice doing 2 stops in succession, but you can never really get quite the same situation with the car rolling into the box. And you can see it's quite difficult for the rear jackman, because he's got to get out of the way when the first car leaves and then get into position when the second one comes in. So the choreography is quite tricky. There's a bit more to organise. Having that many tyres in the pit lane is a bit of a risk. You've got to make sure the right tyres go on the right car. But it is something we do as much preparation for as we can. You try not to do them unless you have to, because if you have any problem with the first car, it also impacts the second, and you can go from being first and second in the race to third and fourth in no time. So it isn't something that you do every day, but on the occasions where it makes sense, it's a really useful tool to have in your tool set. And regarding the plan for the race, well, actually our default was probably more likely going to be a one stop. We thought that on balance that was going to be the better strategy. But we had both in mind, and it was a really difficult race, this one, to know which you were actually going to do. Looking at this graph, the red line shows a one-stop race, and the blue line shows a 2-stop race. And you can see that at the end of the race, the 2-stop is just slightly behind the 1-stop. But then on top of that, we've shown a green line, which is a 1-stop, where you need to do a little bit more management each lap. Now that's only a tenth or so of management, and you can see that if you need to use that management, the 2-stop's going to win. And this is why it was a difficult race, and a difficult one to have any fixed plan going into it, because the one thing we didn't know on race day, the track was slightly cooler, was just how much management were you going to need to make that 1-stop work. And that was why our main plan, rather than being a particular strategy, was to try and build a gap to the Ferrari and then we would just shadow what they did. We'd be looking at the gaps behind and just going for the safest possible race, making sure there's no risk we run out of tyres. Lewis had a tricky weekend, especially up to qualifying. On Friday we were trying some things with the car in terms of setup, trying to sort of explore and understand it a bit more, and some of those didn't seem to be the right direction. That probably upset him a little bit on Friday in terms of finding the balance, finding that rhythm. By Saturday it was starting to come together better for him. He did a very good run on the medium tyre on Saturday morning, but then moving to the soft tyre he didn't get lap 1. He then had to do a couple of preparation laps. There was a bit of traffic around, and by the time he then went on the tyre it had lost the best of its grip. So I think if you just look at the lap times you're probably not seeing the real picture, but it is fair to say that it wasn't his smoothest weekend. The thing with Lewis is he almost always gets it back together by qualifying, and you saw that he did a great job through the qualifying session, and then in the race it was a fantastic performance, very good race pace, very good management of the tyres. But we'll go to Baku, we'll look at what we did in China and just see if we can have a simpler weekend in Baku, because it's always a difficult circuit there, and if we can have a good clean programme we'll hopefully get the best result we can. Thank you so much for all your questions. We'll be back in 2 weeks' time after the Azerbaijan Grand Prix to answer some more.